All right, guys, we're going to get started. Last session of the day. This is the last time I get to tell you that I'm David Burks from Expedient. Thank you. I love you all. Seriously, from a data center standpoint, we're doing a lot of good things in Pittsburgh. Cloud computing. We're headquartered here, but we've got data centers in 6 other cities. If you ever have an interest in just coming down and checking out the facilities and seeing what a fully functioning, working, robust data center looks like, we are always available. You can contact us. We've got 2 guys in the back. We have business cards on us. That's Joe waving. But you're always welcome to come down and check out the facilities and see what all is involved. We can demystify the cloud for you. So anyway, without further ado, because we have cocktails calling, we're going to bring up Justin Driscoll, who's the Senior Director of People and Culture Initiatives at the Tech Council. And the topic is predicting your people's success using big data. Welcome, Justin.
All right. Thanks, David. Come on down. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I am under no illusion that I am standing between you and a cocktail, so I will be somewhat brief in my remarks this afternoon. But as I was talking with Jen Young, who organized this conference, we were talking about some of the things that we've been working on at the Pittsburgh Technology Council around data, around talent, around how to find and choose and select the right people for the jobs that our member companies have open. And one of the things that became very evident is that what we are doing with our member companies around this tool we're going to talk about today called the Predictive Index is very much big data. It's very much about using data instead of just gut feeling to select and hire the right people. It's about using data to put a discipline in place for your organization to create job profiles and to have reports in advance about the people you're trying to hire. So it was very relevant to the conversation that we are talking about here today with this big data conference. Not nearly as technical than what we just heard in this last presentation, but this is very much, we're shifting from the big data technical side to the big data more social sciences, more behavioral sciences. So my role at the Tech Council is very much one of consulting with our member companies and helping them find, attract, and select the right people for their organization. So one of the ways that we do that, and this is the tool we're going to talk about today, is we use a tool called the Predictive Index. And because life is simple and people are complicated. Isn't that the truth? Any of you who manage individuals, anyone who's ever managed people, anyone who's ever been in a relationship of any type knows that people are complicated. And when you put them in the work environment, they bring their complications to the work environment. And so what you have to do is try to find people who are qualified from an education standpoint, qualified from an experience standpoint, qualified maybe from a certification standpoint. That you have to find people who have that background, and then you have to find people who have a good behavioral makeup, who have the right personality makeup to fit within your culture. And the reality of it is, it's really, really difficult. And many organizations don't take the time other than posting a job, looking at resumes, doing phone screens, doing interviews, and using gut feel and what they feel is their own experience to find the right people for their organization. And what we know is that's the wrong approach. And so just a quick background on the PI. It's been around since 1955. It has a ton of validity studies, almost 500 validity studies behind this research. Over 8,000 organizations use the PI worldwide, and it was administered just last year 2.5 million times. That's the largest and most administered psychometric out of any of the psychometrics. Some of you may be familiar with DISC, Myers-Briggs, things like that, even strength finders. They're of the same family of tools. The predictive index is the largest, though. Okay? So here is one of the reasons why the PI is so popular right now. The PI is so popular because we know that when we lose an employee or they're not engaged, it's 1.5 to 2 times that person's annual salary in cost to the organization. When your organization has employees that aren't engaged, they're very smart individuals, or they're really, really good at what they do, but they're in the wrong role, it causes massive problems for the organization. And when you lose them, it costs 1.5 to 2 times their salary to replace them. And those types of numbers are driving employers to find tools and to use new solutions to find the right people for the right roles. The PI is all about finding the right person for the right role. There's no such thing as a good PI or a bad PI. It's not a cognitive test. It's about finding people who are going to be successful in the roles that you have open and taking the guesswork out of finding those people, okay? I'm going to skip that today for now. But what we know about the PI is it has many different applications. Many different applications. It helps us attract candidates. It helps the tech council select the right candidates. It helps us deal with conflict resolution. It helps managers manage their employees better. We've been using this tool in our own organization for a long time. I was recruited and came to the tech council right out of college, and I took this assessment in 2002. So our organization has been using this for a long time, and now we love the fact that we get to work with our own companies to do many of these things, because every company is at a different point in their life cycle. Most companies use it for selection and recruiting, but some companies use it for succession planning, management training, so on and so forth. So it has many different applications. What we know about people, though, is that they have motivating needs. They have behaviors and drivers that help them accomplish and do well in their organization. You still have to look at intelligence and knowledge and skills and experience and references and all of those things that we always look for when we're recruiting someone. But the PI is going to look at the red stuff. What are those motivating needs? What are those behaviors and drivers that are going to make someone successful within your organization? We measure these things when we're using the PI to look for someone. We want to know what drives someone to exert their influence on people and situations. What drives them to do that? How do they handle conflict? How do they handle confrontation with employees? How are they going to handle customers that are upset? How are they going to handle if they're in a position where they're in business development? Are they going to be like a hunter and go out there and find those leads and find those people that aren't knocking on their door? Are they going to be better? Are they better in a role where the leads are coming to them and they're going to cultivate relationships and they're going to inherit business? What drives them? How are they going to influence people and situations? The PI measures those types of questions. What about social interactions with others? What's their extroversion factor here? Are they someone that people drain? Are they a person that people absolutely drain them? Or do they love people? When they get in their car at the end of the day, do they pick up the phone and call someone to tell them how great their day was? Or do they get in their car and they turn on the radio and they don't want to talk to a soul for the next 45 minutes? PI measures that. We need to know that, right? If we have a job that requires someone to be in front of customers all the time, to make conversation, to be someone who's out front representing your company, you want to know how they handle social interactions with others. You want to know if they are introverted, extroverted, and so on and so forth. What about the intensity of a person's pace at work? Are they process-oriented? Or can you go to their desk and interrupt them? Right? If you work in an environment that is constant interruptions, if you work in an environment that has the situation where we work very collaboratively, and we might have to work on this problem right now, and then 10 minutes later we've got to stop doing that and we've got to jump over here. If someone's in a job like that and they're extremely process-oriented, which means when you give them 6 things to do, a process-oriented person takes step 1 and they work on that number, they work on that item on their list. And then they move to step 2. When do they move to step 2? After they completed step 1. and then they move to 3 after they've completed step 2. That's a different type of person than someone who can sit in the middle of a room and just start solving problems over and over again. They can take calls, they can answer emails, they can answer IMs. The PI measures all that. What's the person's pace of work? How do they handle, what type of pace are they comfortable with? What about how does a person conform to rules and structure? The software, the Predictive Index, actually will tell us if a person is someone who likes to go by the rules or if they're someone who thinks the rule book applies to other people. The PI measures that. The PI measures whether someone has the ability to handle risk or if they're risk adverse. How do they handle the details? Are they thorough? Are they serious? Are they disciplined? The PI will measure that. Or are they informal? Are they a little bit more cavalier? Are they a little bit more casual? How do they conform to rules and structure? It's a good question. The PI will measure that. And as you're thinking about the roles within your own organization, you can probably begin to think about where some of these things are important for some of these roles and how you might have people in those roles where it causes them stress. Because when you're looking at the PI, it's important to remember it doesn't mean someone can't do the job. But if they're wired differently, it's going to cause them stress. And it's going to probably cause stress amongst the other people around them as well. Here's the secret sauce of the PI. Here's the differentiating factor of the PI. When we use the PI at the Tech Council and some of our member companies who use it, we don't just look at someone's personality and make judgments on them. We don't administer the PI assessment to someone and say, oh, that's really interesting information that we now know about you, but we're actually creating a job profile about the role that we are recruiting for before we go out to the marketplace and find those candidates. So for example, the hiring manager, HR, the CEO, and maybe an individual contributor all go through this process called the job profile. And everyone fills out the PI for the job, if you will, the job profile for the job, or the PI for the job, and everyone contributes to the process in a 5 to 7 minute assessment, which then gives us a whole bunch of data about what everyone thinks someone needs to look like in order to be successful in this role. And then as the PI consultant, which is myself in this case, takes all of that data, collates it all together, and comes up with one job profile that we can then use to write our job description, that we can then use when we are looking at candidates for this role. So we have created the job profile, and then we go out to the marketplace and say, and we advertise the job. LinkedIn, the Pittsburgh Technology Council's website, Indeed, wherever we advertise it. Candidates apply. And after they pass do they have the education? Do they have the background? Do they have the experience? Will they get what it means to work at a trade association? Once we say yes, then we administer the behavioral profile. We administer the job profile, administer the predictive index, and they take the assessment, 5 to 7 minutes, and then we have 2 pieces of really interesting data. We have the job profile, which we as an organization have taken the time and said, if we find someone that looks like this, they will be successful, and they will excel in that role. And we also have the candidate's individual predictive index, which gives us a ton of data about them, and then we can compare the two. In an ideal world, all the factors between the job profile and the PI match, and we say, excellent. They interviewed well, they had the experience, they match from a PI standpoint, let's make them an offer. But people are complicated. Doesn't always work that way. That's in an ideal world. So then we have to begin to ask ourselves, what can we live with? What can we not live with? If they have A, B, and C, and their D factor is off, then can we live with that, right? Then you have to go through the negotiating process to make sure that we feel confident that who we think maybe their experience can compensate for where maybe some of their shortfalls are. But this job profile process is the most important thing when we use the PI. We aren't just looking at individuals and making judgments and judging them based upon their personality and behavioral makeup, but we're actually using the job profile that we say if we find someone to be successful, if we want someone to be successful in this role, they need to look something like this. And then we find the candidates, put them through the PI process, and then begin to make judgments based upon those 2 pieces of data. So The PI is a software. We use it. It's a software as a service. We log in. Everything's administered via the software. Everything's done online. There's no paper. Lots of different analytical reports. Lots of different. When you have a whole lot of employees within an organization, you can do some really exciting things around the analytics to see how many of your employees have a high dominance factor, how many of your employees have a low dominance factor, how many of your employees have a strong extroversion, and how many have low, and so on and so forth. There's a whole more big data that's embedded in the software that you can use when your organization uses this software like we do. And it has allowed the Tech Council as an organization to speak the same language when we're recruiting people. When we are recruiting people, we know the process begins with creating this job profile. And after we create the job profile, we know, and we have all agreed that if we find someone that looks like this, we're most likely going to make them an offer. If we administer the PI to a candidate, even though we really like them maybe on paper, but once we see their PI, if they miss on some of the factors that we feel are important, we can easily rule them out as a candidate. Because it's not fair to them to put them in a role where they're not going to be successful. Or it's not fair to them to put them in a role where there's going to be a lot of stress because they're not naturally wired to act like that. For example, if I put you in a role where you are tasked with business development and opening up doors and knocking on doors and finding people who don't necessarily want to talk to you, and you have a personality and behavioral makeup that is not wired to do that naturally, that's going to cause you a lot of stress. That's going to cause you, it's going to cause you tension. It's going to cause you a lot of anxiety, right? That's a simple example, but there are many, many more complex examples we could look at from a PI perspective. So I said a lot of information in a very short period of time. We have about 3 minutes left, and I wanted to see if there are any questions before we wrap up here today. Who has the first question? All right. Does anybody use a tool like this within their organization? One? Good. Thanks, Ryan. Well, good. Well, yes, you have a question?
Is this tool being used only in the hiring process, or once you get to building teams and exploring or dealing with particular problems
Yeah.
within the teams? Can you use it also?
The answer is it's used for both. So in this slide, these are the many ways that you can use the PI in an organization. Many organizations use it from a hiring standpoint when they're recruiting. But let's say you have a team that's having some communication problems. The PI is a great tool to be able to administer the PI to that team. Every individual take the PI, take the assessment, and then when you have someone who's trained how to read the PIs, you can begin to see and just talk with the employees, understand what their problems are, and then look at their PIs to see where and why it might help explain why some of those employees are having trouble working well together. Because the easiest people to work with are the ones that look like you, think like you, act like you, behave like you. And so if you're working with a lot of people who are different than you from a personality and behavioral makeup, it often does cause a lot of stress. So for example, if you're someone who, let's say I'm someone who has a low extroversion factor, right? From a PI standpoint, we call that the B factor. If I have a low B and you have a high B, you're someone who likes to talk out problems. You're someone who likes to come over to my cube and talk about all the issues you're having with the client. Whereas if I'm a low B person, I don't want to hear about your problems. I don't want to talk about it. I want to think about it. And then I'm more introverted and more analytical, right? So you can begin to see how some of those things will play out in the work world.
Justin, on that point, can you share the story we had in Georgia with the predictive value test? And second, is this a small enough group that people could take the survey and you can send them the results?
Yeah, if anyone would like to take the PI, we always offer to our member companies, anyone who's interested in it, you can take it for free for yourself, and you can even use it for one job within your organization that you're recruiting for to try to help find the right person. But when Brian and I were in Georgia visiting another tech council, I had just finished PI training and was looking at her. There are 3 graphs when you see the PI. There are self-concept, and synthesis graph. And the middle graph is kind of a look back, about 90 to 120 days. And it's the graph that says, this is how I have to behave in order to be successful at work. And so if the top graph and the middle graph are different, something's going on at work. And when you look at those, you begin to see when the middle graph looks different than the top graph, something's wrong. And so I looked at this woman's PI, and her top graph was one way, and then her middle graph, everything was backwards. If the A was low on the top, it was high in the middle. If her B was high in the top, it was low in the middle. And I said, listen, I just came out of training, so I'm not exactly an expert on this, but I can tell you something's going on. Is everything all okay here?
And you said if we were trying to hire you, we would know this would be a great time to hire you because you don't look happy.
Yeah, we said your graph, something's going on with your graph, and you look really unhappy. And she said, actually, I just quit. I put in my 2-week notice because she was having to behave in a way that is different than how she's naturally wired. And she did it for 2 years or quite a while. So it's not that you can't adjust your behavior to be successful at work. But many people who struggle with turnover and companies that are struggling with turnover or disengaged employees, it's because they have people in the wrong seats. They have the right people, smart people, capable people, but they're in jobs that need someone with a different makeup. So thank you that's a good story. All right, Carol has given me the hook. Any other final questions? I'll hang around. I have business cards. I'd love to talk to you more offline about the PI if you'd like to. So thank you very much. Have a great day and enjoy your cocktails.